Imagine a palace hallway, silent but for the soft echo of footsteps on marble. Now imagine that a single voice, steady, authoritative, uncompromising, slices through that silence and instantly shifts the balance of power. That voice belongs to Princess Anne, and what she just revealed has sent shockwaves across Buckingham Palace, left Prince Harry and Meghan Markle in a state of panic, and changed the game for the future of the royal family in ways no one anticipated. But before we continue, please subscribe and turn on the notification bell for updates. It all started with a secret, a delicate, behind-closed-doors maneuver orchestrated by Harry and Meghan, a plan meant to ensure that their children, Archie and little Lilibet, would carry royal titles despite their step back from official duties. On paper, it seemed simple, almost benign, a quiet negotiation, a nod here, a handshake there, all orchestrated discreetly through palace aides. But simplicity, as we've seen in royal life, is rarely what it seems. Every action, every decision, carries weight. And this one was about to explode. Have you ever wondered what happens when someone tries to bend centuries of tradition to their will? When the rules that have governed one of the most watched and scrutinized families in history are suddenly tested by ambition and personal desire. That's the story unfolding here. Harry and Meghan believed they could quietly secure HRH titles for their children, navigating the royal machine with charm, strategy, and secrecy. They believed that this move would be smooth, unnoticed, and perhaps even accepted by the palace. But then, Princess Anne, the Princess Royal, the family's iron-willed disciplinarian with a reputation for doing what is right, not what is convenient, intervened. Anne's revelation is more than just a family squabble. It's a tectonic shift in the balance of royal influence. She didn't merely voice disapproval, she acted. She made it clear, decisively, that this secret deal would not happen under her watch. The quiet corridors of the palace suddenly became a stage for confrontation, for authority to clash with ambition, for loyalty to collide with personal desire. And as the news leaked, or rather, was deliberately revealed, the repercussions rippled outward. Panic in one corner, frustration in another, and a public suddenly caught between curiosity and judgment. To understand why this matters now, we have to consider the timing. The royal family has been navigating turbulent waters for years: resignations, public statements, interviews, media scrutiny. Every move by Harry and Meghan has been magnified, dissected, and debated, from the moment they stepped back from royal duties to the explosive revelations in interviews and documentaries. Yet despite all this, there remained one area that was sacred, almost untouchable: the lineage and titles of the next generation. Archie and Lilibet, though young, are symbols of continuity, of legacy, of the monarchy itself. Their titles are not mere words. They are markers of status, protection, and identity within a centuries-old institution. When you realize that Harry and Meghan allegedly tried to negotiate these titles secretly, it suddenly paints a different picture. This was not just about family. It was about influence. It was about rewriting rules that have stood for hundreds of years, about carving out recognition without fully honoring the structures in place. And the audacity of it? It would have worked if it weren't for Anne. She stands apart in the royal hierarchy not only in title, but in principle. Known for her dedication, her unwavering sense of duty, and her sometimes intimidating insistence on doing what she believes is right, and has never been someone to be easily swayed, bullied, or ignored. Imagine being Harry. You think you've orchestrated a private, quiet plan. You believe the palace machinery can be gently nudged, that aides can be persuaded, that tradition might bend for the sake of family unity or public optics. Then, out of nowhere, a single voice, resolute and uncompromising, shuts it down. No discussion, no negotiation, no middle ground. Just a firm, unambiguous blockade. That is the moment of panic, the moment of shock, the moment where the theoretical becomes real. The monarchy is not something you bend lightly, no matter your intentions or emotional stakes. But the drama doesn't end there. This revelation does more than halt a plan. It exposes fractures, tensions, and questions about loyalty, ambition, and communication within the royal family. Why would Harry and Meghan feel the need to attempt such a negotiation secretly? What does it say about their trust in the family, in the monarchy, in the very institution they were once a central part of? And for Anne, what motivated her intervention beyond mere protocol? Was it loyalty to the Queen, to tradition, or something more personal? A protective instinct for the monarchy she has devoted her life to preserving? This story is also a reflection of the intense scrutiny the family lives under. Every move is public, every whisper potentially headline-making. Yet here we are, a secret negotiation, a blocked plan, and a revelation that could have reshaped not just the perception of Harry and Meghan, but also the future status of their children. It's a reminder that the monarchy, while steeped in tradition and ceremony, is also intensely human, filled with ambition, emotion, and sometimes conflict that would rival any dramatic series. Think about the stakes. Archie and Lilibet are still children. Their titles are symbols of who they are and where they belong. The potential HRH titles would have granted them privileges and recognition they technically aren't entitled to, given their parents' step back from official duties. It's not merely semantics. It's the difference between being fully enveloped in royal duties and public life versus being semi-detached, protected, and yet still visible. This isn't about pride. It's about legacy, perception, and control. And when you consider the secrecy, the strategy, and the potential fallout, it becomes clear why Anne's intervention is monumental. So why does this story grip the public imagination now? Because it combines elements everyone is drawn to. Secrecy, strategy, power plays, and family dynamics. It shows that behind the gilded walls of Buckingham Palace, human emotions, pride, fear, loyalty, and frustration drive decisions just as strongly as tradition. It also challenges narratives. Harry and Meghan have often been portrayed as visionaries, modernizers, and outsiders willing to challenge convention. But this story complicates that image, showing ambition intersecting with rules that cannot be easily ignored. And it challenges Anne's image too. She is not merely a dutiful royal, but an active guardian of tradition, willing to intervene decisively. And now we arrive at the critical moment. The moment that changes everything, that leaves everyone watching wondering what will come next. Princess Anne's voice breaks the silence. Her words are heard clearly. I made sure it didn't happen. Simple, unambiguous, final. Imagine the tension in the room, the ripple through aides, the message sent to Harry and Meghan, the implications for the children, and the public's reaction once this inevitably leaked. It's a single sentence that encapsulates power, principle, and the complex web of family, duty, and authority. So where does that leave us? With a family divided by ambition and duty, with children caught in the middle, and with the public riveted, asking the same question we all are: what happens next? How does this shift the delicate balance of power, loyalty, and perception? And most importantly, what does it say about the limits of personal ambition within a centuries-old institution? As we dive into the next chapters of this story, we'll explore the secret negotiations, the personalities involved, the panic that set in, and the far-reaching consequences of a single, decisive blockade. We'll examine Harry's reaction in detail, Meghan's strategic considerations, the palace dynamics, and the media storm that inevitably followed. Each layer reveals more tension, more drama, and more insight into how a family that appears poised and composed on the outside is navigating some of the most intense personal and institutional pressure imaginable. And just when you think you've grasped the full impact of Anne's intervention, the story twists again. Because in a royal family, nothing is ever simple, nothing is ever truly private, and nothing is ever final. The next revelation will challenge perceptions, ignite debate, and leave both the family and the public asking, how far would you go to protect tradition, legacy, and the future? But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. The corridors of Buckingham Palace are meant to be places of ceremony, tradition, and careful, almost ritualized diplomacy. Every move is measured, every word considered, every glance interpreted. But even within these storied walls, secrets have a way of slipping through, and in early 2025, one such secret began to take shape, a secret that would shake the royal family to its core. It started quietly. Harry and Meghan, having already taken the unprecedented step of stepping back from official royal duties, began exploring a path that many would consider bold audacious, and controversial. Securing HRH titles for their children, Archie and Lilibet, despite their own semi-detached status within the monarchy. To anyone outside the royal circle, the move might seem logical. After all, their children were born into the royal family, were direct descendants, and carried the bloodline of the monarchy itself. But within the palace, titles are not merely ceremonial. They are markers of hierarchy, privilege, and, crucially, public accountability. The negotiation itself was shrouded in discretion. Unlike formal discussions, which are documented, broadcast in statements, or carefully mediated, this was a conversation that relied on whispers, intermediaries, and careful positioning. Aides were discreetly approached, not with outright demands but with suggestions, proposals, and subtle lobbying. The plan, in essence, was to bypass direct confrontation with the senior royals, particularly the Queen, and instead maneuver through palace channels, hoping the end result would be quietly approved. Imagine the logistics: letters drafted, meetings held in hushed corners, schedules shifted to avoid scrutiny, and legal advisors consulted to find precedents that might support such a move. The children's HRH titles, though not justifiable by precedent given Harry and Meghan's step back, were being framed as a natural extension of their heritage. On paper, it was polite, strategic, and measured. In reality, it was a gamble, a calculated push against centuries of established protocol. But the audacity didn't end with the plan itself. Harry and Meghan also sought to control the narrative, even if the deal had gone through. They envisioned a scenario where the public would see the titles as a natural acknowledgement of the children's status, framed in a positive light. The monarchy adapting, modernizing, and showing flexibility. It was both a power move and a PR play, a combination designed to protect their children's future while subtly asserting influence over a system they no longer fully inhabit. The palace, of course, operates on a completely different timeline and set of priorities. Titles are not just given. They are weighed, debated, and confirmed with deliberation. Every precedent matters. Every implication is considered. And while Harry and Meghan believed they had a viable path, they underestimated the extent to which even subtle moves could be scrutinized, resisted, and ultimately blocked. The children themselves were largely unaware, as they should have been, but their very existence as central figures in this secret negotiation added an almost mythical quality to the story. Imagine being Archie or Lilibet, young and innocent, as the adults around you maneuver and strategize, your very titles being discussed like pieces on a chessboard. The stakes were high. A successful negotiation would mean recognition, privilege, and visibility. A failed one would not only be humiliating for the parents, but could also spark public debate and internal tension within the royal family. What makes this chapter particularly fascinating is the duality of intention versus consequence. Harry and Meghan's plan, on one hand, was rooted in love and protection. They wanted their children to have the recognition and security that comes with royal titles. On the other hand, it was also a power play, a subtle assertion of influence within a family from which they had partially distanced themselves. And it is precisely this duality that set the stage for conflict. Ambition tempered by affection, strategy tempered by principle. The aides involved in the negotiation were reportedly caught in a tense balancing act. On one side was the desire to accommodate the wishes of high-profile family members. On the other was the obligation to uphold established tradition. Palace staff are trained to operate in secrecy, discretion, and loyalty, but even they recognized the potential explosion of this plan. Every whisper risked becoming a headline. Every small action could spark controversy. And yet the negotiation persisted, driven by determination and, perhaps, a belief that secrecy was enough to shield them from consequence. It is worth considering the psychological dimensions at play. Harry, a prince who has spent much of his life in the spotlight and under immense pressure, may have believed that this negotiation represented not just a personal victory, but a form of agency. A way to assert control over his children's future in a system that often constrains him. Meghan, equally aware of public perception and media scrutiny, likely saw the negotiation as a strategic necessity, a calculated step to secure her children's standing while managing the optics of the situation. Together, They were operating in a space where personal desire, public image, and institutional rules collided. But every secret has a breaking point. The very nature of the royal family, with its intricate hierarchy, vigilant aides, and deeply embedded traditions, meant that even the quietest maneuver risked exposure. And this is where the story begins to shift from strategy to confrontation. Because one person within the royal circle, someone whose reputation for steadfastness and principle is unmatched, would not allow this quiet negotiation to proceed unchallenged. That person was Princess Anne. Anne's awareness of the secret plan did not come by accident. Within the palace, information flows through multiple channels, and even the most careful plans are rarely completely hidden. And, ever attentive and deeply committed to upholding the institution, became aware of discussions surrounding Archie and Lilibet's titles. Her reaction was decisive. Whereas others might have raised a gentle objection, suggested caution, or merely expressed doubt, and understood the implications and the precedent such a negotiation would set. To allow it would not just break protocol, it could subtly undermine the authority of the monarchy itself. Imagine the tension in the palace when Anne's position became known. On one side were Harry and Meghan, invested in a plan they believed was feasible. On the other was Anne, resolute, principled, and unyielding. The stage was set for a confrontation that would define the limits of influence, the boundaries of tradition, and the dynamics of family loyalty. This was no longer a simple negotiation. It was a challenge to the very structure of the royal institution. And yet, the intrigue of this chapter lies not only in the mechanics of the plan, but in the human emotions it evokes. Harry's hope, Meghan's strategy, and unwavering stance. They are all facets of a story about ambition, principle, and the complicated web of family relationships. Every decision carries weight, and every action has consequences that ripple outward, affecting not only those directly involved, but also the public perception of the monarchy as a whole. So as we reflect on this secret attempt, it becomes clear why it matters. It is not simply a tale of titles or privileges. It is a story about power, loyalty, and the delicate balance between personal ambition and institutional responsibility. The stakes are immense. The children's future, the parents' reputations, the integrity of the monarchy, all hanging in the balance, teetering on decisions made in quiet corridors and whispered meetings. And then came the turning point, the moment when the seemingly unshakable plan met an immovable force. Princess Anne, the Princess Royal, stepped in. Her words, her authority, and her principled stance would ensure that this negotiation, no matter how carefully orchestrated, could not proceed. The consequences of her intervention were immediate and profound, sending shockwaves not only through the palace staff, but also, inevitably, to Harry and Meghan themselves. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. The moment that transformed a quiet, behind-the-scenes negotiation into a full-blown royal crisis began not with a confrontation, but with observation. Princess Anne, known within the royal family and beyond as a no-nonsense, fiercely principled figure, had been made aware of Harry and Meghan's secret attempts to secure HRH titles for Archie and Lilibet. To outsiders, and might seem reserved, even austere. But anyone familiar with her history knows that her calm exterior conceals an unwavering commitment to duty and an unshakable moral compass. When she learned of the plan, her reaction was swift, precise, and unambiguous. This would not happen. It is easy to underestimate Anne's influence within the family. Unlike the public-facing royals whose lives are constantly under media scrutiny, Anne operates quietly, but with a level of authority few dare to challenge. Her life has been defined by service, responsibility, and an almost surgical approach to handling crises. She does not seek the spotlight, she does not negotiate for attention, and she does not tolerate breaches of principle. In this instance, that very reputation made her intervention decisive. The process of stepping in was deliberate. Reports suggest that Anne did not approach Harry and Meghan with anger or confrontation. There were no dramatic scenes in the halls of Buckingham Palace, no raised voices or public statements at first. Instead, she engaged with the aides and advisors involved in the negotiation, questioning every detail, probing for precedent, and emphasizing the importance of adhering to royal protocol. She made it clear that, Under no circumstances would any secret deal granting HRH titles to Archie or Lilibet be allowed to proceed. Anne's intervention was strategic. She understood the nuances of palace life and the implications of each action. Allowing the negotiation to continue would not only disrupt the established order of the family, but could also set a precedent that might embolden others to bypass protocol in the future. For Anne, this was about safeguarding the institution as much as it was about protecting her nieces and nephews. In her mind, tradition and duty outweighed personal desire, a principle that has guided her throughout her life. The choice to intervene also revealed Anne's understanding of timing and optics. A direct confrontation with Harry and Meghan at this stage could have been messy, resulting in public speculation, leaks, and potentially damaging headlines. Instead, she focused on blocking the plan quietly through the palace apparatus, using her authority and credibility to ensure compliance without immediate drama. This subtle, yet decisive, action is characteristic of Anne's approach. Firm, principled, and effective, without unnecessary theatrics. The effect of her intervention on palace staff was immediate. Aides who had been facilitating the negotiation suddenly found themselves caught between loyalty to Harry and Meghan and respect for Anne's authority. The tension in the palace escalated quickly, though still behind closed doors. Those involved in the negotiation were forced to reconsider their roles, their advice, and their strategies, realizing that this was no longer a matter of quiet negotiation, but of family authority and institutional principle. Harry and Meghan, of course, were not oblivious to the change in dynamics. When the realization sank in that, and had effectively blocked the titles, reports suggest that there was panic. The plan they had meticulously crafted, one they believed could navigate palace politics discreetly, was suddenly halted by an unyielding force they had not anticipated. Imagine the psychological impact, a sense of urgency, a need to reassess strategy, and the creeping awareness that, in royal matters, personal ambition cannot override centuries of tradition without consequence. Anne's reputation for steadfastness also played a psychological role. Harry, who has often grappled with the pressures of royal life, recognized the significance of her intervention immediately. Meghan, similarly astute and media-savvy, would have understood the broader implications for public perception and family dynamics. This was not a minor obstacle. This was a principled blockade that carried both symbolic and practical weight. The drama, however, is not just about the halt of a secret negotiation. It is about the broader implications for family dynamics. Anne's intervention sent a clear message to the entire royal household. Rules, traditions, and protocols are not optional, and attempts to circumvent them, even for the children, will be scrutinized and potentially blocked. For Harry and Meghan, who have often positioned themselves as outsiders seeking to modernize and challenge tradition, this represented a confrontation with the unyielding structures of the monarchy, a reminder that influence is limited when weighed against principle and precedent. It is also worth noting Anne's method of communication during this intervention. She reportedly relied on clarity, authority, and calm persistence. There were no threats, no ultimatums shouted in anger, no dramatic displays designed to provoke a public spectacle. Instead, Anne's influence was conveyed through measured, deliberate actions and an unmistakable moral authority. The message was clear. The plan to secure HRH titles for Archie and Lilibet would not succeed. Period. The impact of Anne's decision extended beyond the immediate palace environment. Once word of her intervention leaked, or was strategically shared, the public and media began to digest the news. Suddenly, a quiet negotiation had become a headline-grabbing story of principle, authority, and family drama. Commentators debated motives, speculated about potential fallout, and questioned how this move would affect Harry and Meghan's relationship with the royal institution. The stakes were not only personal but also public, highlighting the intense scrutiny under which every royal action is examined. Anne's involvement also illustrates a key dynamic within the royal family: the balance between tradition and modernization, between public duty and private desire. Harry and Meghan represent a generation willing to challenge convention, seeking autonomy and a redefinition of royal life. And, in contrast, embodies the continuation of established norms, serving as a guardian of tradition and principle. Their collision, in the context of the children's titles, is emblematic of a broader struggle within the monarchy, a tension between innovation and preservation. By stepping in decisively, and effectively forced a confrontation with reality for Harry and Meghan. They could no longer rely on secrecy, subtlety, or behind-the-scenes maneuvering. The boundaries had been defined, and the limits of influence clearly marked. This moment serves as a dramatic reminder that even within one of the most high-profile families in the world, actions have consequences, principles hold weight, and no negotiation exists in a vacuum. And yet, the story does not end with Anne's intervention. While she succeeded in halting the plan, the reactions, emotions, and strategic recalculations that followed are equally compelling. Harry's panic, Meghan's next moves, and the ripple effects across the royal family, media, and public perception are all integral to the unfolding narrative. Anne's decision set the stage for confrontation, negotiation, and revelation, a dramatic interplay of power, principle, and ambition that would shape the story for months to come. The significance of Anne's intervention also lies in its symbolic power. It was more than a rejection of a specific plan. It was an assertion of authority, a reminder that tradition matters, and a demonstration that individual desires cannot override centuries of established norms without consequence. For Harry and Meghan, it was a moment of reckoning, a point at which personal strategy collided with institutional authority, forcing them to reconsider their approach, their priorities, and their understanding of the monarchy's limits. And now, as the palace adjusted to the reality of Anne's intervention, a new layer of tension emerged. The public, unaware of the quiet negotiations that had taken place, would eventually learn of the drama, adding media scrutiny to the mix. The children, though innocent, became symbols in a much larger narrative about power, family, and tradition. And the royal household, while outwardly composed, was navigating a delicate web of authority, loyalty, and strategic communication. And had stepped in, decisive and unyielding. She had blocked the secret negotiation and sent shockwaves through the family. But what came next, the reactions, the recalculations, and the unfolding drama, would escalate the story even further. The stage was set for a confrontation that would test loyalties, challenge assumptions, and reveal the true dynamics of one of the world's most scrutinized families. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. When news of Princess Anne's decisive intervention reached Harry and Meghan, the calm that they had relied upon during their carefully orchestrated plan evaporated instantly. Panic, subtle at first but rapidly intensifying, began to set in. It's not easy to imagine the pressure that comes with navigating royal life. The expectations, the scrutiny, the constant balancing act between personal desires and institutional duties. But in that moment, Harry and Meghan were confronted not by public criticism or media speculation, but by the internal machinery of a family whose traditions are ironclad and whose members are fiercely protective of precedent. Panic is a curious thing. It's not just an emotion. It's a physical reaction, a cognitive disruption that affects decision-making, confidence, and strategy. For Harry, whose life has been defined by public attention since childhood, the realization that Anne had unilaterally blocked the HRH titles was more than just a setback. It was a blow to both his sense of agency and his carefully laid plans. He had assumed, perhaps naively, that discretion, charm, and behind-the-scenes influence could bend tradition, or at least negotiate around it. Anne's action proved otherwise, and the realization hit like a thunderclap. Meghan, equally strategic and media-savvy, immediately understood the broader implications. The block was not merely a family disagreement. It was a public relations crisis waiting to happen. Word, intentional or accidental, of a thwarted secret negotiation would almost certainly leak, inviting scrutiny, debate, and judgment from a public intensely invested in the monarchy's workings. For Meghan, who has long been attuned to narrative control, the stakes were high. The story was no longer private. The stakes were suddenly both personal and public, and the timing could not have been worse. Within the palace, the panic manifested in subtle ways. Aides who had facilitated or even merely been aware of the negotiation began to second-guess their actions, wondering whether they would be caught in the crossfire of blame. Small decisions, previously routine, were now weighed with added caution. Even a casual conversation in the halls risked exposure, and every interaction became a potential pressure point. Harry and Meghan, accustomed to managing their environment, found themselves navigating a rapidly shifting landscape where trust, discretion, and strategy were all suddenly under threat. Psychologically, this panic was compounded by a sense of urgency. Titles, particularly HRH designations, are not just symbols. They represent influence, visibility, and privilege. For Harry and Meghan, securing these titles quietly would have been a legacy move, ensuring their children's position in the monarchy without exposing themselves to further public scrutiny. Now, with the plan halted, that legacy was suddenly uncertain, and the timing was critical. Any misstep could amplify scrutiny, lead to unfavorable media narratives, or create tension with other senior royals. The panic also had emotional dimensions. Harry's relationship with Anne, while respectful, has always been characterized by a recognition of her authority. In the past, this authority may have been an abstract reality, but now it was very real, tangible, and obstructive. The sudden shift from a controlled negotiation to an imposed blockade triggered frustration, anxiety, and a sense of vulnerability. For Meghan, whose life has often involved controlling narrative, image, and perception, the inability to steer the situation directly fueled further tension. Together, the couple was confronting not only the mechanics of a blocked negotiation but the emotional impact of being thwarted within a system they had once been part of but were now operating outside of. The palace environment amplified these feelings. Walls that normally serve as symbols of stability and tradition now felt constricting, a reminder of rules, protocols, and hierarchies that could not be circumvented lightly. Every aide, every advisor, every casual comment became a potential risk. Panic, in such a context, is not merely an emotional response. It is a strategic hazard. It forces rapid recalculations, second-guessing, and sometimes impulsive decisions that can exacerbate a crisis rather than resolve it. Reports suggest that Harry began to reassess his options immediately. Every potential avenue was scrutinized. Could he appeal? Could he negotiate with and directly? Could the Queen or other senior royals be persuaded? Each possibility carried risk, and each delay increased tension. Meghan, focused on narrative and optics, likely began evaluating the potential for media management, framing, and strategic communication. But the challenge was enormous. Anne's authority was absolute, her principles unyielding, and her knowledge of palace protocol comprehensive. Any attempt to bypass or override her would be risky, both politically and personally. In addition to the immediate panic, there was also the anticipation of fallout. Harry and Meghan knew that word of the block negotiation would not remain entirely private. Rumors, leaks, and speculation would inevitably surface, potentially framing them as manipulative or overreaching. The public, ever hungry for royal drama, would dissect motives, question loyalty, and speculate on the family's internal dynamics. Panic, in this sense, was not only about the immediate obstruction, it was about the consequences cascading outward, threatening to shape public perception and internal relations for years to come. The panic extended beyond individual emotions. It infiltrated decision-making structures. Advisors who might have acted confidently in normal circumstances found themselves hesitant, second-guessing, and cautious. Meetings that would have been straightforward became fraught with tension. Each email, each conversation, each piece of correspondence carried heightened significance. Harry and Meghan were suddenly operating in a high-pressure environment where every move had immediate and far-reaching consequences, and where panic, even in small doses, could magnify the risk of error. The emotional weight was also significant. Harry, often portrayed as impulsive yet strategic, faced a direct challenge to his ability to control his family's narrative and legacy. Meghan, whose public persona is meticulously curated, confronted the risk that private negotiations could become public controversies. Together, they were confronting not just a blocked plan, but a sudden confrontation with reality. That the royal family, despite appearances of flexibility or modernization, still operates according to rules, hierarchies, and principles that cannot be easily bypassed. And yet, in the midst of this panic, there was also a realization. The situation had escalated beyond what they could manage quietly. The intervention by Princess and, once internal, would inevitably become part of the larger story. The narrative was no longer under their control. It was now shaped by principle, authority, and the palace's internal hierarchy. Panic, then, became both an emotional response and a strategic complication, influencing decisions and amplifying the stakes. But what makes this episode particularly fascinating is the intersection of human emotion and institutional power. Harry and Meghan, motivated by love for their children, concern for legacy, and strategic foresight, were confronted by a single figure whose principles and authority outweighed their plans. It's a stark reminder that even in the most high-profile families, power, influence, and decision-making are not merely about ambition. They are deeply intertwined with principle, loyalty, and tradition. As the palace staff adjusted, as aides recalculated, and as Harry and Meghan grappled with their panic, one thing became clear. This was not merely a temporary setback. Anne's intervention had fundamentally altered the landscape, forcing the couple to confront limits they had previously underestimated. Every subsequent decision would be influenced by this moment, shaping strategy, emotional response, and family dynamics in ways that would ripple far beyond the immediate negotiation. The royal panic, in essence, is a lens through which we can understand the larger story. Ambition meets principle, secrecy meets authority, and emotion meets tradition. It's a human story as much as it is an institutional one, a drama of hearts, minds, and centuries-old rules colliding in real time. And just when Harry and Meghan began to navigate this panic, the next revelation loomed. Something that would test not just their strategy and composure, but also the very limits of what they believed possible within the royal family. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. In the midst of palace intrigue, negotiations, and panic, there were two innocents caught squarely at the center of the storm, Archie and Lilibet. Though just children, their identities, privileges, and futures had suddenly become focal points in a high-stakes drama that spanned generations of tradition, duty, and royal expectation. It's easy to forget, when observing the glittering world of royalty, that at the heart of these conflicts are real children. Children who cannot influence the decisions being made, yet whose lives are profoundly shaped by them. Imagine being Archie, a boy who had been born into the public eye yet shielded as much as possible from its harsh glare. His parents, Harry and Meghan, had carefully curated his experience, balancing exposure with privacy, affection with public responsibility. Suddenly, his very title, something he had no say in, became a bargaining chip in a negotiation he could not even comprehend. The implications of this are staggering. A child's identity, public perception, and even their safety are intertwined with decisions adults make behind closed doors. Lilibet, even younger, faced similar circumstances. Though barely old enough to understand the mechanics of the world around her, her life trajectory had been influenced by family dynamics, media attention, and now, secret negotiations about royal status. Titles, seemingly abstract to the casual observer, are deeply consequential. They dictate protocol, influence public access, and carry expectations that extend far beyond childhood. These are not simply honorary labels. They are markers of social position, responsibility, and familial hierarchy. The attempt to secure HRH titles for Archie and Lilibet, despite their parents stepping back from royal duties, illustrates the extraordinary lengths to which Harry and Meghan were willing to go to secure recognition and protection for their children. From their perspective, the titles were not merely symbols. They were shields, a way to maintain privilege, access, and influence within the monarchy without directly re-engaging in public duties. For children who would inevitably be under intense scrutiny, these titles represented security and legitimacy, even as the process to obtain them caused conflict among the adults involved. Yet this raises a profound question. What is the impact on the children themselves? Titles confer status, but also responsibility. Archie and Lilibet, were they granted HRH designations, would become visible in ways beyond their parents' control. Every public appearance, every photograph, every word spoken about them could carry amplified significance. Their lives, already under the microscope, would become even more scrutinized, making privacy a rare commodity. For parents like Harry and Meghan, who have often emphasized the importance of protecting their children from media intrusion, the irony is striking. Princess Anne's intervention, therefore, can also be seen as a protective act, not just for the monarchy or tradition, but indirectly for the children. By blocking the titles, she may have shielded Archie and Lilibet from added public exposure and the burdens that come with formal recognition in the royal hierarchy. Titles carry obligations, expectations, and protocols that are not easy to navigate, particularly for children whose parents are not actively participating in royal duties. In this sense, Anne's actions served a dual purpose, upholding tradition while safeguarding the innocent lives at the heart of the conflict. The psychological dimension is also worth considering. Children sense tension even when they do not fully understand it. The emotions of Harry and Meghan, the stress, panic, and urgency, would inevitably permeate the household. Even young children absorb atmosphere, tone, and energy. In a way, Archie and Lilibet were participants in this drama not by choice, but by circumstance, their futures intertwined with negotiations, authority figures, and historical precedent. Every meeting, every whispered conversation, every strategic decision had an impact on their world. Moreover, the very fact that their titles were being debated in secrecy reveals the unusual position in which these children exist. Unlike peers whose identities and status are determined by birth or circumstance in ordinary society, Archie and Lilibet are enmeshed in a system where tradition, hierarchy, and public perception are inseparable from everyday life. Their parents' desire to secure recognition, even indirectly, speaks to a broader tension. The struggle to balance protection with legitimacy, family autonomy with institutional expectation, and love with public responsibility. The role of children in royal history is not insignificant. Past generations have seen heirs and royal offspring become symbols of political stability, public sentiment, and continuity of the monarchy. Every decision regarding their status carries ramifications far beyond the personal sphere. For Harry and Meghan, negotiating HRH titles was an attempt to navigate this historical weight while asserting some control over the lives of their children, a delicate and inherently risky endeavor. It is important to recognize the paradox at play. Titles are designed to confer honor and recognition, yet they can also impose burdens that a child may not be ready to carry. Privacy is eroded, public expectations are heightened, and every action is scrutinized against centuries of precedent. In a sense, Anne's intervention, while ostensibly about principle and protocol, also shielded Archie and Lilibet from the immediate pressures and responsibilities that formal recognition would bring. It's a subtle but significant layer to the unfolding drama. Children, though seemingly peripheral, are central to the stakes and consequences of adult actions. Furthermore, the secrecy surrounding the attempted negotiation meant that the children were unknowingly at the heart of a high-stakes chess game. Every maneuver by parents, aides, and intervening royals could affect their public perception, private security, and eventual place in the line of succession. It's a level of pressure unimaginable in ordinary childhoods, where identity is largely shaped by family, education, and personal exploration rather than centuries-old institutional norms. The tension is heightened by the contrast between intent and outcome. Harry and Meghan's intentions were protective, strategic, and grounded in a desire to secure a legacy for their children. Yet the outcome, Anne's decisive intervention, introduced conflict, emotion, and uncertainty. It's a reminder that even with the best intentions, actions within highly structured systems carry consequences that ripple unpredictably, affecting everyone involved, including those who cannot participate in the decision-making process. From a storytelling perspective, placing the children at the center also heightens emotional stakes. Viewers cannot help but empathize with their position, even indirectly. The innocence of Archie and Lilibet contrasts sharply with the strategic maneuvers, panic, and principled decisions of the adults around them. It is a humanizing element amid palace intrigue, a reminder that beyond titles, negotiations, and authority, real lives are at stake. And so, As the secret negotiation unraveled and Anne's authority imposed an unyielding boundary, Archie and Lilibet became, in a sense, the unintended yet pivotal figures in the unfolding drama. Their presence shaped motivations, influenced decisions, and amplified consequences. The adults' actions, debates, and interventions were inextricably linked to their well-being, status, and future within the monarchy. Yet, even with the titles blocked, the story of the children is far from complete. The ripple effects of these events, Harry and Meghan's strategic recalibrations, media attention, and public perception, would continue to touch their lives in unexpected ways. The very attempt to secure HRH titles, regardless of its failure, leaves a lasting imprint, a subtle shift in how the children are perceived, how the parents navigate royal relations, and how the monarchy balances tradition with evolving family dynamics. But what came next would take the focus from the children's symbolic position to the intricate workings behind palace doors, where secrets, strategy, and authority collide in ways that few outside the royal circle ever see. The grandeur of Buckingham Palace and its sister estates can easily fool the untrained eye. To the public, its marble floors, gilded chandeliers, and perfectly trimmed gardens, a symbol of timeless stability and protocol. But behind those ornate doors, the palace is a living organism, constantly in motion, where information, influence, and discretion collide in complex, often invisible ways. The drama surrounding Harry and Meghan's attempt to secure HRH titles for Archie and Lilibet provides a rare glimpse into this world, a place where even whispers can carry immense weight, and where the balance between secrecy and authority defines outcomes. Palace doors are more than physical barriers. They symbolize layers of hierarchy, protocol, and loyalty. Every office, corridor, and meeting room is mapped with careful precision, determining not only who has access but how information flows. An aide's casual remark in one room can ripple through the system, reaching senior royals and advisors within hours. The palace staff, trained in discretion and subtlety, act as both guardians and facilitators, carefully balancing the needs of the royals with the rules of an institution built over centuries. In the case of the HRH titles, Harry and Meghan relied on this machinery to navigate the system quietly. The negotiation was meant to be invisible, operating through trusted aides who could advise, communicate, and, in theory, influence decisions without attracting attention. It was a delicate dance. Advance too boldly, and you provoke resistance. Move too cautiously, and momentum is lost. The objective was simple on the surface: secure recognition for the children while minimizing scrutiny. But the reality was exponentially more complicated. The aides involved were caught in a precarious position. They were loyal, yes, but also professional, aware of protocol, and mindful of potential repercussions. Acting on behalf of Harry and Meghan, even subtly, meant navigating a labyrinth of rules and traditions. It meant weighing personal judgment against institutional loyalty. For many, the negotiation may have felt like walking a tightrope over a canyon. The slightest misstep could trigger a cascade of consequences. Palace doors also function metaphorically. They represent the divide between private ambitions and public duty, personal desires and institutional expectations. Harry and Meghan were operating on one side of this divide, seeking a personalized outcome that clashed, subtly but firmly, with the established order. Princess Anne, on the other side, embodied the other half. Unwavering loyalty to tradition, meticulous adherence to protocol, and an almost instinctive ability to detect and neutralize attempts to bend the system. The clash, though quiet, was inevitable. Inside those doors, the environment is rarely dramatic in a cinematic sense. There are no duels or shouting matches. Instead, the tension manifests in understated ways: raised eyebrows, hesitant suggestions, repeated clarifications, and endless layers of verification. Every proposal for Archie and Lilibet's titles was examined for precedent, compliance, and long-term implications. Legal advisors weighed in, historical documents were consulted, and senior aides prepared contingencies for every possible outcome. The goal was clear: no unauthorized deviation from protocol, no shortcuts, no room for ambiguity. What Harry and Meghan may not have fully anticipated was just how effective Anne's intervention would be within this system. By simply asserting her authority and making her position clear to the aides, she effectively shut down the negotiation without needing a direct confrontation with the couple themselves. It is a testament to her reputation and understanding of palace mechanics. In a family where personal influence can often sway outcomes, and leveraged her authority with surgical precision, leaving no room for misinterpretation or counteraction. Yet, the behind-the-scenes environment was not immune to emotion. Panic, frustration, and strategic recalibration permeated the air. Advisors who once facilitated communication found themselves hesitating, unsure whether to continue their support or retreat. Decisions that might have been routine suddenly carried weighty significance, with every option scrutinized for risk. Harry and Meghan, on the other hand, were forced to adjust on the fly, realizing that their calculated moves had collided with a movable principle. The machinery of the palace, often invisible to outsiders, had intervened decisively. The drama also highlights the subtle hierarchy of influence. Within the palace, power is not solely determined by public visibility. Rather, it resides in knowledge, authority, and the ability to enforce compliance within a framework of tradition. And, by virtue of her reputation and position, occupied this space fully. Her intervention illustrates the often invisible levers of control within the monarchy. Quiet words, strategic directives, and the ability to halt initiatives before they reach the public eye. In this environment, even well-intentioned plans must navigate a labyrinth of both seen and unseen forces. It is also worth noting the culture of discretion. For every headline, every public statement, there are countless interactions that never reach the public. Conversations, clarifications, and interventions that shape outcomes without fanfare. The secret HRH negotiation was intended to fall into this category: unseen, controlled, and contained. Anne's action, though equally private initially, demonstrates that discretion alone cannot overcome principle when authority is exercised decisively. And yet, the interplay of secrecy and influence creates layers of tension. Harry and Meghan were acutely aware that even subtle leaks could ignite media speculation. Palace aides, conscious of their duties, were careful to act with discretion, yet every move had the potential to be observed, interpreted, or misrepresented. The negotiation, while hidden, existed in a pressure cooker of anticipation, risk, and expectation. Behind palace doors, the stakes are immense because they are both immediate and enduring. Every decision affects not only the present moment, but also long-term precedent. Granting HRH titles quietly might have seemed a personal favor, but it would have implications for succession, protocol, and the perception of fairness within the family. Anne's blockade preserved these boundaries, ensuring that tradition remained intact and that every child's position within the monarchy followed established rules. And yet, as strategic as Anne's intervention was, it did not end the story. The ripple effects, the panic, the recalibration, the emotional stakes continued to unfold. Every advisor, every staff member, every member of the royal household now had to operate with heightened awareness, knowing that the balance of power had shifted decisively in Anne's favor. The children's futures, the couple's plans, and even the public's perception of the family were all affected by actions that took place quietly, behind closed doors. The drama behind palace doors is a reminder that what appears serene from the outside is often turbulent on the inside. Titles, privileges, and protocol are not abstract concepts. They are living, breathing forces that influence behavior, decisions, and outcomes. In this case, the intersection of secrecy, authority, and principle created a high-stakes scenario in which personal ambitions collided with institutional imperatives, and where the consequences extended far beyond the immediate actors. And as the palace staff recalibrated, as Harry and Meghan grappled with the implications, and as Anne's authority solidified the blockade, one thing became clear: the story was far from over. The drama, the tension, and the stakes would only grow, drawing in media attention, public speculation, and even further strategic maneuvering by those directly involved. But what came next would escalate the conflict even further, revealing cracks, surprises, and emotional stakes that no one could have predicted. The moment Princess Anne delivered her decisive intervention, it sent a shockwave through Buckingham Palace that rippled far beyond the quiet corridors where the initial negotiations had taken place. It wasn't just a matter of blocking a plan. It was a symbolic act of authority that demonstrated, in no uncertain terms, that no member of the royal family, regardless of fame, popularity, or media savvy, could bypass centuries of protocol without consequence. The shock was immediate, palpable, and transformative. Inside the palace, aides and advisors scrambled to recalibrate. Those who had been facilitating Harry and Meghan's attempts to secure HRH titles for Archie and Lilibet suddenly found themselves caught in a web of uncertainty. Who should they answer to? How far could they act without overstepping their authority? Every email, conversation, and note became a potential risk, a reminder that the rules and had reinforced were not merely guidelines. They were boundaries that could not be crossed. For Harry and Meghan, the shock manifested as panic, disbelief, and frustration. They had believed the negotiation would succeed quietly, that careful maneuvering through trusted aides would secure their children's titles without public scrutiny. Anne's intervention upended that assumption, revealing a boundary they had underestimated. It wasn't just a personal setback. It was a public and institutional reminder that the monarchy operates on rules, hierarchy, and principle, not ambition or desire. The reactions of the palace staff provide a window into just how significant Anne's blockade was. Aides who had felt confident in their ability to navigate the negotiation quietly now realized that their efforts had been neutralized by someone with both authority and principle. Their roles shifted overnight from facilitators to observers, forced to watch as the power dynamics crystallized around Anne's decisive action. Even minor gestures, comments, or decisions had to be reconsidered in light of her authority, illustrating how one person's principled stance can redefine an entire operational structure. The shock extended beyond internal dynamics to the public sphere. Though initially contained, news of the blocked negotiation eventually reached journalists, commentators, and royal watchers. The story quickly became a talking point, not because of scandalous leaks, but because the narrative itself was compelling. A high-profile couple attempting to secure unprecedented titles for their children, thwarted by a royal known for her unwavering principles. Public fascination surged. Headlines splashed Anne's decisive words, framing her as a guardian of tradition and a counterbalance to the modernizing ambitions of Harry and Meghan. The monarchy, it seemed, was very much alive behind the scenes, and the public couldn't look away. The emotional stakes for Harry and Meghan were profound. Titles for Archie and Lilibet were not just symbolic. They represented legacy, influence, and the recognition of their children's position within a centuries-old institution. Having that opportunity blocked, especially in secret, triggered a cascade of strategic and emotional recalibrations. It forced the couple to consider alternative avenues, rethink their approach, and confront the reality that even their fame and public support could not override the principles embedded in the royal family's hierarchy. Anne's action also sent a powerful signal to other members of the family and the palace staff. The blockade was more than a single decision. It was a precedent. It made clear that personal ambition must be tempered by institutional rules, that principle can outweigh influence, and that quiet, discreet attempts to bend protocol are unlikely to succeed against unyielding authority. For the royal household, it was a reminder that tradition is not optional, and that those who seek to challenge it must be prepared for resistance. The psychology of shock in this context is worth examining. Harry, accustomed to navigating both media attention and family dynamics, faced a reality he had underestimated. Meghan, with her strategic mindset, had to reconcile her desire for control with an environment where authority was clear and non-negotiable. Together, they confronted an uncomfortable truth. The monarchy, despite its glamour and modernization, is not easily swayed. The shock wasn't just about a blocked plan. It was about the limits of personal agency within an institution larger than any individual. There were also practical consequences. The blocked negotiation forced a halt to every aspect of the plan: discussions with advisors, potential communications with senior royals, and any behind-the-scenes efforts to influence outcomes. Every move had to be reconsidered, every strategy recalculated. The palace environment, normally efficient and structured, became a crucible of tension, anticipation, and uncertainty. Advisors had to act cautiously, aware that Anne's influence made any misstep potentially consequential. The shock extended to the broader royal narrative as well. For years, Harry and Meghan had been viewed by some as modernizers, outsiders attempting to reshape the monarchy's image. Anne's decisive action challenged that narrative, illustrating that tradition remains a central pillar and that even high-profile family members are subject to established rules. This dynamic, the clash between ambition and principle, became a focal point for public discussion, media analysis, and internal reflection within the family. Interestingly, the shock also had protective elements. By blocking the HRH titles, and may have shielded Archie and Lilibet from the additional pressures, scrutiny, and obligations that such recognition would entail. Titles carry responsibility, public attention, and protocol obligations that young children, whose parents have stepped back from royal duties, might struggle to navigate. In this sense, the blockade was both a principled act and a subtle safeguard, ensuring the children's lives remained as normal as possible under extraordinary circumstances. From a narrative perspective, the shock serves multiple purposes. It creates tension, elevates stakes, and reinforces the human element of royal life. Behind the opulence and ceremony are real people, real emotions, and complex dynamics. Anne's intervention crystallizes these dynamics, transforming a quiet negotiation into a dramatic story of authority, principle, and consequence. It is a story that resonates because it combines power, emotion, and high stakes, all centered on family, legacy, and tradition. And yet, as shocking as the blockade was, it did not end the unfolding drama. Harry and Meghan's reactions, strategic recalculations, and potential next moves set the stage for further tension, intrigue, and high-stakes maneuvering. The palace, media, and public were now fully engaged, and the story had shifted from a quiet negotiation to a dramatic confrontation with far-reaching implications. But what came next would escalate the tension even further, introducing surprises, emotional stakes, and strategic moves that no one, including the public, anticipated.